As one of the surprise hits of 2022, Stray finally makes its way to Xbox One and Xbox Series consoles. Even a year on, the premise is as captivating as ever, a tight 4 to 5 hour adventure that takes us through a city in ruin, all seen through the eyes of a stray cat. How this came to be, what happened to the humans, is all part of the mystery to be solved, but until now, Stray has of course only been on PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5 and PC. The good news is, developer Blue 12 Studios' porting efforts here pay off handsomely, with the Unreal Engine at its core scaling to 4 Xbox machines. The setup on each, in terms of resolution and frame rate, is surprisingly different for each however. So today, I'm taking a quick look at each console in turn. How does the base Xbox One console run the game, being the most GPU and CPU limited option of the quartet? Does the game achieve visual parity across the board, from the base machine right up to Series X? And how do the consoles in between fare, in the form of Series S and One X? Let's find out. Let's kick off then with a look at PS5 versus Series X in comparison. Just to confirm what you might already expect, yes, both machines are practically identical. We get the works here. Series X runs at a dynamic 4K resolution, much like Sony's machine, and at 60 frames per second, all of which is a hugely satisfying leap over the 1080p resolution and 30 FPS on PS4 and PS4 Pro consoles. Now, this dynamic res system does incur a few drops in image quality during taxing city areas. For Xbox Series X in particular, I've noticed 1728p, for example, in frames taken right after a camera cut in cutscenes. The PS5 version has a similar range, and both could potentially go lower, though typically the turnout is a true 4K in most areas. Otherwise, the side-by-sides are nigh on identical. In texture detail, blur quality, draw distances, Stray's world is immaculately presented on Series X at 4K, with nothing added or lost from the PS5 version. So good news. Perhaps the bigger question mark hangs over the state of the base Xbox One. Let's jump to an early frame rate test on this one. Typically, this is the version that suffers from the biggest resolution drop in multi-platform projects, and yes, the most dramatic cutbacks in visual settings. But here, in Stray's case, and even despite the huge drop down in power spec next to One X, Series S and X, it does actually retain its core visual quality settings, surprisingly. Yes, image quality suffers on base Xbox One. The biggest drawback is that it typically renders at a native 1600 by 900, a drop below even base PS4's 1080p. Dynamic resolution scaling, DRS, might be engaged too, but 900p is the most typical number. Beyond that, Stray looks the part on base Xbox One with an often matching feature set to Series X. Expectedly, it's also a 30 FPS experience, again much like base PS4. The readout isn't a perfect one though, sadly. The opening cutscene and tutorial area puts us in the mid to high 20s at points, and there are later areas where transitioning between locations causes a long bout of hitching. Also significant is the sudden frame time spikes at autosaving points, which is an issue we also saw on PS4 consoles. Outside of these, the experience is otherwise hitting 30 FPS most of the time. Even in the taxing slums area, impressively, it holds 30 FPS, so it's not a total write-off, not by any means. Just do go into this one expecting some rough points. It's impressive how well Stray's world scales between the generations on Xbox. For perspective, let's reel in the base Xbox One again and compare it to the opposite extreme, the Series X. Texture work and even texture filtering is broadly matched in quality, even if it is viewed through a lower resolution window on base Xbox One. It's 900p versus 4K in this case. However, we get the same motion blur, we get screen space reflections, SSR, and draw distances for geometry, even while ziplining quickly through the city are a match. And also, shadows run at a comparable setting on the last-gen system as we circle this opening area here. The only discrepancy is in depth of field quality, where the bokeh patterns are lowered in resolution in cutscenes, which appears to scale with Xbox One's lower 900p output. Likewise, there is more pop into certain decorative textures, like the flyers around the slums area, but the end result still looks great for the base Xbox One, and most of these minor drawbacks are hidden by the lower native res. Every sign points to Stray being very much a last-gen optimized project in design then, and it proves no Xbox machine is left wanting. From base Xbox One right up through One X, Series S and Series X, nothing substantial is lost in world detail. Its visual features stay in place regardless. The most obvious points that divide each is of course the resolution and frame rate targets. So let's jump into more frame rate testing here. Starting at the top with Xbox Series X first, we are of course seeing that 4K 60fps target being extremely well met. Across the opening few chapters really, I'd struggle to find any complaint with this one. Much like PS5, it's a watertight 60fps regardless of where you tread. The only small snag being that there are these very occasional one-frame dips and hitches during autosaving. Once again, you'll notice a frame time spike, a momentary blip anytime the autosave icon appears in the bottom left, and very occasionally, just roaming the city, a single frame might drop. But beyond that nitpick, which is true of PS5 as well, this is a fluid 4K 60 experience with most GPU intensive areas mitigated by the dynamic resolution. Next along is Xbox Series S, and this is where it gets interesting. The order of priority for Series S is performance first and image quality second, and so we get a native 1080p picture, 1920 by 1080, all running at 60fps. The positive spin here is that being a 4 teraflop machine, it's in a similar spec bracket to the PS4 Pro, albeit with a much more modern GPU. And yet here, the Series S doubles the frame rate over PS4 Pro's 1080p and 30fps. That's one way to look at it. The other way is, it's running at a quarter of the 4K peak resolution of its sibling, the Series X, and the scale of that downgrade is surprising to see. In play, the game's art design still looks great at 1080p, dynamic scaling might be in play as well, but it's so typically fixed at this max figure. And honestly, the priority for 60fps is the right one, I think. All other visual settings are intact, and the fact is the game runs at a practically flawless 60fps throughout the opening chapters. Even those one-frame blips and autosaving hitches are minimized next to Series X impressively. The only exceptional moment in performance is this drop to the mid-50s during the first cutscene. Besides that though, Series S plays beautifully as a 1080p 60fps experience. Jumping over to Xbox One X, we see easily the most ambitious but troubled version overall. In terms of setup, in fact, it's almost an inverse to the Series S experience. This time the priority is image quality over performance, with One X targeting up to 1728p resolution at 60fps. The lower bounds of its dynamic resolution come in at 1080p, and potentially, though I've yet to catch it, the upper bounds could even stretch to 4K. In practice, 1728p is the very highest I've seen One X go to, and it does use the full spectrum of these resolutions to try sustain 60fps. The problem is that the frame rate delivery is ultimately all over the place. Even with the res dropping to 1080p, it pays the price, and One X has sustained stretches at around 50fps during the opening section. Later on, it gets even worse, and navigating the slums, we're looking at numbers as low as 40fps, and there are even what appears to be streaming issues that crash the reading into the 30s, with hugely erratic frame times. All round, this shows us why the PS4 Pro version didn't follow a similar route with a 60fps target. In fairness, certain portions of the game are still a solid 60fps on One X. The tight alleyways, the platforming in confined spaces all flow pretty smoothly. But then, out in the slums area, we're wavering between 45 to 60fps. So the obvious point is, on VRR supporting displays, a lot of these areas should appear perceptually smoother. Except, across the game, One X also suffers from some of the worst hitching of any Xbox console. The game's autosaving system triggers big frame time spikes, and equally, just running incurs seemingly random drops. The evidence does suggest a major CPU limit here, with assets trying to stream in quickly, which is of course lifted with Series S and X. Overall then, One X offers an ambitious but on balance, unsuccessful trade between performance and image quality. For those without VRR supporting displays, it would benefit hugely from a 30fps cap option, if mainly to mask those fluctuations in GPU load, though the autosaving and streaming hitches are also a clear issue. The state of One X here is an interesting what if for the PS4 Pro version, being the other mid-gen refresh console, and in fact, I went back to the PS4 Pro version to see if it had indeed been updated, but sadly, even on patch 1.04, PS4 Pro remains at 1080p and 30fps. In terms of sheer playability, it's still a perfectly fine version today of course, but it is oddly out of step with what One X is trying to do. All round, the result for Stray is still successful, at least for 2 out of the 4 Xbox machines. Series S and Series X are rock solid experiences at 1080p and 4K respectively, and against all odds, the base Xbox One pulls its weight with a 900p experience, though the hitching and frame rate drops do at points blemish the experience. The One X release is the real outlier though. It's the one that will take a VRR display to enjoy it to its fullest given how erratic its unlocked frame rate is. With all this in mind though, Stray's transition to Xbox even after a year's delay has been well worth the wait, and it's a great chance to check out this sleeper hit if you haven't already. But that's all from me today, just a quick look for this one, but if you did enjoy it, feel free to like or subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell for instant notifications as any new video lands. To get a high quality version of this video, check out our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net, and to get in touch directly, you know where to find me. But from me for now, thanks for watching.